this episode of Under the Radar, I am going to be talking about a pair of in-house movement IWCs, specifically the caliber 852 and the date model, the 851. This is, in my opinion, kind of the heyday of IWC when they were producing their own in-house movements and making a lot of innovative in-house movements that kind of went on to affect the brand's future and also just watchmaking in general. So both of these watches are from the 1950s and from early IWC up until about the 1950s, 60s, we kind of see a shift in IWC to where they're not producing their own in-house movements anymore, and we see them kind of outsourcing their movements a lot more. And I kind of want to focus on these in-house movement IWCs specifically because I think they just make for really good watches, both in their wrist presence and their dial details, but the accuracy of their movements as well is really incredible, and the innovations that they're able to come up with are really cool. All the way down to the manual winding caliber 89 and these 852s that I'm going to be talking about today. So what makes the Cal 852 so special is it is an in-house movement. It's a post-war movement, meaning it was produced after World War II, but it utilizes this Peloton winding system, which is just an extremely efficient way for a wristwatch to utilize an automatic movement, which is just really cool, especially as watches were transitioning from manual winds more into the automatic winding movements that we see in most watches today. And IWC actually still uses this winding system today, and it's kind of just been improved upon ever since the Cal 852. So it's kind of historic in that aspect. Other than the movement and why the Cal 852s are so cool is the dial features and just the wrist presence you get from these watches in general. They are, essentially Calatravas. They're just really beautiful watches though, and for the most part they were produced in stainless steel, but there is some 18K variants out there, and I believe there's some gold plated variants. But what also makes these 852s so cool is, other than the movement, is the wrist presence and the dial features that these watches were produced with. They are Calatravas. The two I'm featuring today are stainless steel. These were produced in yellow gold as well. The steel versions, in my opinion, offer a dressy piece that still offers that utilitarian presence that you get with like a sport watch or something along those lines, but will still like slide underneath your cuff if you're in a dress shirt or in a suit or something like that. The one I have on my wrist has this pie pan dial, which I just think is such a gorgeous design because it's like sort of flat in the center and it tapers off towards the edges along with the applied markers. And this one in particular, which is a date version, it's the Cal 852-1, has a really interesting placement of the date window. It's more towards the center of the dial rather than being right on that 3 o'clock marker. In fact, this watch has a 3 o'clock marker and a date window, which is something you don't see very often. And I think it actually helps in easily telling the time when you just sort of glance at your wrist. This is a loomed version, so these can for the most part be found without luminous material on the dial, but this one does feature its loom, and it's all in really good condition. It has luminous hands as well, and the hands that are featured on these watches are most consistently going to be Dauphine style, so it's kind of like that sort of sword shaped hands, but you can see them with like alpha style hands as well. But I just think these watches specifically offer a very sophisticated yet useful design. So with that, I am going to change my watch to the Cal 852. So what I have on my wrist now is the classic Cal 852. No date, just clean dial. This one doesn't have loom, so it has solid hands, and it just has those very characteristic of sort of like Patek Phillipe Calatravas from this era and prior. Just those applied markers, those applied minute markers, and it just has just a beautiful dial presence. These watches aren't too small, they're not too big. They have this like really nice universal size that, I personally have kind of smaller wrists, but I think somebody with a much larger wrist than me could pull this off no problem, as like they're sort of more dressy oriented or more professional sort of style watch if this is the sort of style that they want to go for. But it just has such a sophisticated look to it, and I think it makes for a great watch. I mean, I'm in like jeans and a t-shirt today, and I feel like it isn't out of place. And over the past couple of years, I've seen some movement in these watches, but I really stand on the fact that I do think that they're underappreciated. I think just this whole genre of IWC is a little underappreciated just for how, special these watches are, being, in-house movements. They really give you that sort of like emulated Patek feel on wrist. They really do a good job of just being sort of like no nonsense in design. They're beautiful, they're simple, and they get the job done. I think there is a good amount of room for these things to grow. I don't think that they're gonna, shoot up in value overnight, but I think that it's a really good piece to purchase, sit on, enjoy, and 5 years, 10 years down the road, you'll eventually see these things kind of move up in value a little bit more. But I just kind of wanted to touch on these because I do think that they're underappreciated, and I think they're really great watches and a really great value. Most of these can be found underneath the $4,000 range. So if you're in the market for a Patek but you don't have Patek money, I think the IWC Calatravas from this 1950s, 40s, 60s era is a really good place to go. So with that, I want to say thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content just like this. Follow us on Instagram @CraftedTailored. And if you have watch questions, we are here to help. Drop us a line at info@craftedtailor.com. We'll see you in the next one.